Hello everyone, how you doing today? Thought I'd show some new stuff, and I want to show you a little bit of some things I discovered with a different kind of flight model. To start with, I got this new little ship. Um, this is a Tier 2 SV, just kind of a general purpose SV again. And basically, it has your standard features, and it also has warp drive. Now, I don't have the interior finished, but I kind of laid out some parts inside of here right now, and then the storage and whatnot, and trying to figure out how much storage I can get in, um, and what parts I can actually get in. Now obviously this is below the 15,000 CPU cap just by a little bit, and that's why I've got all these parts sitting around in here just to see exactly everything I can put into it. And basically my remaining budget is probably going to be used up just trying to make the interior look pretty and get a few more blocks in here and things like that. Now how this is working is it has 8,000 storage and 1,500 ammo storage. For weapons, it has 4 rocket launchers, 2 Gatling guns. The hull is made of steel. Has a drone hatch, of course warp drive, does not have a shield, and it does not have a constructor. Those are kind of things I had to give up at the Tier 2 range. I'm just not going to fit those into a ship like this. And I kind of, some of the designing about this too, I was trying to create that nomad effect. Now what I'm talking about there is the nomad is a bit deceiving, because when you look at it and you kind of just assume that these areas on the sides here are actually part of like thrusters and things like that, until you actually walk into the ship and you realize that that space was actually used for interior space, and it's kind of a bit of a decoy seeing these thrusters here like that, when actually the body of the ship actually does go out to the edges over there. So that was just kind of something I did a long time ago with that, and it made the ship kind of bigger inside than a lot of people would probably expect. Kind of like a little bit of a shock when you walk in the hangar that it's bigger than that. This ship kind of does the same principle. It's a bit of a deceiver, kind of looking like this area over here is in fact not like used for internal parts of the ship, but when you walk inside it you realize that it actually is. So that was kind of what I was trying to do here. But also at a Tier 2 class, I wanted to see what I could do and what I can't do. And this one works pretty well, actually. So I've got 2 of them here now. This one is unloaded, and it flies pretty good here. Let me turn on the HUD. So it's not too bad. Now loaded up, though, because I also put 8K storage in it, which I think is pretty good for a Tier 2 creation, especially one that has weapons and stuff too. Let me show you the one that's loaded up with elevator blocks currently. And this one, obviously, it's a lot rougher to get off the ground loaded up. So this one's basically got a full load of elevator blocks. But at that, it can still get off the ground and fly away. And of course all these designs are trying to not use any RCS whatsoever, because RCS costs a fair amount of CPU. So if you can build ships that don't need RCS, you're going to be better off, and you're going to have more CPU available for other stuff. Now at low tiers that matters quite a bit. At higher tiers not so much. Like Tier 4 especially, I wouldn't care that much about it, but Tier 3 you're kind of borderline. Tier 2 you definitely want to watch it. Even like this ship here at the CPU that it's at, I would prefer to have a constructor in it, but that's just going to be a little bit too much. I could like remove these wings because honestly they're just kind of for decoration, more or less, but I would hate to do that. Kind of wreck the looks of the of the design, in my opinion here. But I wanted to show you something else today, and here, let me get into creative mode. And yes, thanks for all the tips on the whole DM thing. Basically, on the last video that I made, I thought I had turned DM on in the console, when in fact I didn't. So, basically it's kind of like a toggle, and I think it might have already been on, and when I hit the command, it actually turned it off. So then when I was hopping up to check, the weather settings, basically the options over here, they weren't, this whole icon wasn't showing up. And now I realize what I did wrong and why it happened, and I appreciate everybody giving me heads up on that. So what I'm doing here is building another test chassis here in a minute. We'll just keep this really simplistic yet. So here, let me just slap out a cockpit here. I want to show you a different flight model, and this has to do with only one directional thrusters. So all these other designs are basically, you got thrusters in all 6 directions, and getting them to fly without the need of RCS is kind of requiring me to put these thrusters out in outer ends of the ships. So if you notice, like the thrusters are way out here, around here, and that's kind of why it has that kind of widest, squarest look to it. This ship, I want it to be completely different, so, and cheap. So this would be actually for a tier 1 type. Now, of course, this is just screwing around right now. I want to show you some results, so don't consider this like any kind of final ship whatsoever, because it's far from that. So I'm just picking out some big wings. And no, I won't actually use these wings on my actual ship, but I want to give you the idea of what's going on here. Let me put in a couple parts here in a minute as well. I'm sure that's real safe, having a generator right next to the pilot seat. But this is just temporary stuff here. So, okay, so we've got basically fuel tank, generator, cockpit. Not much else is going on here. I want to show you some things with flight model that I've kind of learned by screwing around with things. To start with, here, let me get on some symmetry as well. To start with, if you were to take and add a couple thrusters to the back of this, I guess I'll just leave this here for now. Let me get some fuel in here. Alright, and here, we'll just, so can I get back into survival mode here a minute. Alright, so if I were to fly this currently, it basically only goes forward. I don't have any control really at all. I didn't expect it to flop over like it did, but with that big pedestal down there, I guess I can see why. Hold on, let me fix that too. That's going to screw up these tests. Obviously on those commands there, I'm in survival, but CM will toggle you back in and forth between creative and survival mode, and this affects how you can build stuff within it. So basically I just went out of there so I could do this. Now I'm going to try to go back in. So back in survival. My test is really bombing out here. Oh, it's not on. Oh, I can't select it. Uh-oh. What's on the gun? What's going on? Oh, core. Oh, duh. I took out the core on it. Let me place a new core. Okay, there we go. So we're in creative. Back into survival. Alright, so on this ship here, you see it flies, and it's actually moving pretty quickly, but I have zero turning whatsoever. can't, no pitch, no yaw, nothing. I can only go straight. So what I've seen on a lot of designs so far is they will go through and add a RCS. Excuse me. Yeah, we got a bunch of snow where I live, which is kind of early, which really sucks. So we got snow on the ground already. I actually might need to go shovel the driveway. So with the RCS in this setup, I can again steer and turn about at this level here. So obviously it's not super agile, but it does get around. Now this is extremely cheap creation to move you, cost-wise. So you're looking at like 4 minutes and 15 seconds, and it's unlock level 5. So for transportation, this works pretty good. But as a person who likes to design stuff, I wanted to. Oh, where'd it go? It doesn't like me. It flew away. Stop there, buddy. Stop. Yeah, I've here. Let me get it back into creative mode here a minute. Okay, so what I want to do is my goal was to take this same concept of a design, which is ultra cheap to make and doesn't need much in thrusters. I wanted it to work without the use of an RCS. So looking at numbers here, these little thrusters I'm putting on here are 56 CPU. An RCS is 750 CPU. So you can literally get 13 of these little guys on for what it costs for one of these. So let me first, I'll get rid of the existing RCS. I'm going to blow away these two thrusters here. And, I want to show you kind of the layout I found that actually does work. So what I'm going to do here is build out a little something over here. Kind of funky. Okay, so as opposed to having the two thrusters, how I had it somewhere in the center, and it doesn't matter, I'll show you just another example here. Say I put a couple more thrusters in the middles here, that does not help. Again, I got zero turning whatsoever. But if I were to take these thrusters out and put them, and oh, let me get some more of these here, and put them out on the outer edges, like in a layout like that. Now, I've got actually better control than I had with the RCS in there, and currently has no RCS in here. And also too, if you're looking at like the fuel and things like that, flying like all over the place like I am right now, this thing has 182 minutes of flight time left in it, and that's in operation with one fuel tank. So it's quite inexpensive to operate, and cost-wise, it is, well, 5 minutes and 15 seconds build time, and hardly needs any resources, and will fly forever on very low fuel. So it's a pretty neat little setup here, but I found that essentially the thruster setup needs to be something along these lines on the back side. So I got no thrusters anywhere else on the ship, just on the back. The further up or down I could get them, the better handling yet. And if you put them closer or tighter into the middle, like say I only had a separation like this, it will still work, and you'll still have turning, but it is going to reduce that turning some. It doesn't make it out of range of being used, but it's certainly slowed down quite a bit by realigning those thrusters in this layout. And let me grab some more of these a minute. So as another choice, I'm going to go really crazy this time, and we'll add a couple more blocks from each of these directions. And this actually would probably increase the turning even more, I think. Well, in other words, it flies pretty good for what it is. Now, obviously, the setup on the back here would be hard to hard to manage, um, like landing and things like that. So, essentially, what I'm trying, this has been a little problematic too. In at least in survival mode, where I've been trying to do a lot of tests for weights and volumes, I'm getting all these weird little things that happen especially with this flight design. It likes to fall when I'm trying to work on it and things like that. So it's a little more problematic, I guess, overall working on stuff. And I kind of got to let it fall and flop on the ground before I can touch it again. Let's see if I get in. But it only does that sometimes. Like this time it's not moving. Maybe I did come to a complete stop, or maybe I did come to a complete stop. Something like that's affecting it. But essentially, I plan on making like a tier 1 SV kind of in this type of format here, where I might only have the thrusters out about that size, so I can make the ship usable and get some landing gear on there and everything else like that. But even at this, I'm getting a pretty good flying ship, especially for a tier 1, you know, without the use of RCS, using the newer flight model. Now, one thing I have noticed, though, with this flight design is when I do roll, like, what happens is that right now I'm hitting the E key to roll over to one side, is it kind of starts to move and then it sort of stops and then it starts doing it again. So it's kind of weird. It doesn't feel right. It feels like when I'm holding the E key, or now I'm actually holding the Q key down to roll, that it should just kind of smoothly roll to whatever its parameters would be. But it seems to kind of be very jerky about it. Sometimes not want to roll at all, but other times it does when I'm in motion. This might be related to your speed. I'm actually getting like 70 on speed on this little guy right now too. But I don't know. It's a little funky, especially if I'm going in one direction. I'm just trying to like level off right now. It does it in increments, and then it pauses, and then it just kind of keeps on doing that, like what you see here. So that's a weird thing. I don't know if that's a bug or not, or something I'm not seeing in the gameplay here. But whole point in case is I can make, or any of us can make, a SV that is extraordinarily cheap and doesn't require much at all in thrust if you follow this design layout. Now, of course, there's side effects to this too. One, it doesn't strafe. You have no brakes, so you basically got to just kind of slow down gradually. But other than that, it's very, very cheap. In fact, and very low on CPU use. Like right now, I'm at 688 out of 6,000. So that would give me options to throw on some guns or a constructor or other things on this ship, or bigger thrusters. And honestly, if I put on more powerful thrusters, all those stats will jump up a little bit. In fact, I'll just show you an example of that. I'll go on to these next step up thrusters, which are still pretty inexpensive. And here, let's get this back on. I'll separate them out another block row this time too. So now we're running 4 of those kinds of thrusters, puts us at a CPU of still just under 1,000. And flying this, you can see the difference. Now this thing's super agile. But flying in a straight line and pitching, you see it even more than ever, where it does this incremental turning while holding the key down. So that kind of creates that choppiness, or that area that does not feel smooth. And I gotta think there's something wrong with the or something that needs to be tweaked in the logic behind this process and how it's handling the thrust right now. But just something to be aware of. But overall, if I'm mouse turning though, that does pretty good. So again, I got this really speedy ship now that's, well, under 1,000 CPU, and let's see what level. I think I might have brought it up to level 7 with the newer thrusters. Still pretty good. Still, he's about a 6-minute build time with hardly any resources really needed for it. Now, granted, this is ugly as all get up, and I wouldn't, build a ship that looks like this necessarily, but I want to take this design and make a tier 1 SV out of it. So that's kind of my plan, but I wanted to experiment on how I could build one that does not need the RCS, because if I can save that 750 RCS for other things, I think that would be definitely beneficial. And not to mention, this layout and thrust does quite a bit better than some RCS. As a comparison, let's just taking a look at. Oh, that's another little problem I've got too. I don't know the numbers. It doesn't want to tell me the numbers. I wonder if that's a survival or creative mode thing. No, I'm just going to double check that a minute. No, I still don't know the numbers. So it's really hard to judge short of flying a ship to see how it's actually going to work right now, unless I'm missing something. But here, for instance, I wanted to, again, I will take some thrusters here and put them right in the center again. And then I will add, let's add a couple RCS back over here. And then I'll fly it. It's actually not it's not bad right now with 2 RCS in it, but it's not quite as responsive as it was with the 4 thrusters. So that's pretty much what I'm kind of getting at. And of course, because I added the RCS, my CPU is now over 2,000. So in relation, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to not use the RCS and instead place your thrusters more efficiently. And then you could add more thrusters, which is technically going to give you more speed. Now this was still doing 70 with only 2 of those on max speed, but once there's more to the ship and it gets weighed down, that number will start to fall. So yeah, you can see it's much more responsive at this stage. Too responsive, but there's hardly any blocks that it's moving to with four thrusters. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you on flight model designs that I've been kind of figuring out. Now, I am very curious on how this same approach works on CVs as well. Like for instance, I couldn't quite figure out why the Persis carrier on a couple of videos back was flying the way it was due to the fact that I removed like all the thrusters on the front side of the ship. And I think it was flying the way it was because of this same idea. The Persis did actually have thrusters kind of located on the back corners of the ship, and I'm thinking that was giving it its turning abilities, and it was, it seemed very, very quick too. So that's kind of it. That's pretty much all I've got to show you today. Basically, I was just kind of puttering around with a new ship and a couple other things, and obviously we got T-Rex's tank over here and this item here. I still haven't got around to getting those LCDs on there that I kind of wanted to. And the idea I was actually going for, and I can show you on a different build, had to do with the base or landing platform for the Tashi. This guy here. Just spawn this in somewhere right now. So I was thinking of doing something along these lines, like what you got going on here with these projector LCDs, but maybe try to line them up to certain areas, like on the bottom of this SV. I was thinking it could handle like one big tank, like what's here, or if you had a smaller tank and then like a some other kind of smaller creation, you could maybe dock it up in the front area and actually have two different things mounted to it. This thing handles weight quite well, and that's mainly because it's using these bigger thrusters on the bottom and more. So that's why this one can deal with the 26K storage plus having a tank this size mounted to it, and also with some other testing too. I did load this up with some ammo, and I did put in some pentaxid as well, but still able to get off the ground fully loaded with the tank. Just barely. I mean, it didn't have a lot of leeway there. So on high gravity planets, no, that it wouldn't be up to handle that much of a load. But I dare say, if it wasn't carrying cargo and just moving a tank, it could probably handle the high gravity planets. That's another whole realm of testing, and I can't even speculate on how much, like say you had a 4G planet, how much thrust would you actually need. I do plan on kind of diving into that in survival mode here, or I believe I'm going to have to go to like a modded version of the game, or to actually see a planet with that high of gravity. I believe it caps out at 2 Gs in game. So making stuff for 4G, basically it just needs a lot of extra thrust. So items that can handle 4G well are probably going to be gas guzzlers. Of course, you can turn off thrusters when you're not using them and things like that, but that's kind of the general point I'm kind of getting at. Let's see, what is this planet? This planet is, this one's got really low gravity on it. Lower than I thought. I thought this was 0.97. Maybe in this newer survival game that I fired up, it's a little bit different. So yeah, that kind of throws me for a loop too on the gravity. Now makes me wonder if my new ship that's sitting here does in fact have enough lift thrust, because the gravity on this particular planet isn't a very good test bed. I really wanted 1G. I'll look for that next time I fire up a survival game, try to find at least a 1G planet so I can do these tests. But anyway, that's all I've got for today. I hope you understand the whole idea with that flight model. This was another one of my tests that I was messing around with, so it's pretty much the same idea. And yeah, I think I would like to go to town and try to build some kind of ship to run this kind of layout, more or less, and as a tier 1. And I think it would work out pretty well. Of course, I'll try to get some more function into it, and I'd like to get a interior into it as well, just because I'm crazy like that. But if you didn't want an interior and you just wanted the bare minimums, a ship like this would be very, very cheap to spawn, and if it didn't do anything else, it would be very cheap early game transportation, and very good on fuel use as well. So it's got a lot of perks going for, especially the early game stuff. Late game stuff, maybe a CV, a scaled up CV with this same kind of design, might work out pretty good. Of course, you're not going to be able to land straight, and you're going to need forward momentum to get moving. So if you had a big mountain or something in front of you, that would be problematic. But other than that, you could build a very fuel efficient ship that also is very natively low on CPU, in which you could add more functionality to it in other places because of it. Well, all right. That's all I've got for today. But this week, I do plan on releasing a couple of basically the MCRN base pieces, so the point defense and the storage. The release schedule, I was talking to T-Rex, and I think late this week is or possibly like going into the weekend is when he'll be available to release this tank, and I'm going to try to release this ship at the same time. Since they more or less kind of go together, it would be a great thing to have them both out at the same time. This one I still don't know when I'm going to release, and where I got a bit of a dilemma on this one is I was designing this to be a tier 3, and it is, but when I first built it, tier 3 topped out at I believe 24,000 on CPU. This one went slightly over but managed to keep 100% CPU efficiency, but now it was upped to 40,000, so I've got a whole lot of unused CPU on this right now, and I'm not sure exactly what to do with that. Could try to pop in warp and shield, but I didn't really design it for that in the first place. But I'm pretty sure it could be done. In fact, someone else gave me a heads up that they actually did get it to work with warp and shield on it as well. So, and that's at the tier 3 level. The tier 4 level goes to 100,000 on CPU for SVs, and that allows you much bigger stuff yet. I mean, it's not like tier 3 necessarily is small, and the charge actual for blocks is quite low. So you can build some pretty big things at tier 3. At tier 4, I'm speculating, I don't know for sure, but like some of the biggest SVs I ever built might be able to be tier 4s. Like say, take the MX-14 for instance. This is a pretty big ship. A lot of guns on it and things like that. Now I'm sure it's completely blowing the CPU in present form, but if you take a look at this, it's got 177 RCSs at 700 CPU or 750 CPU a pop. That's a lot right there. I might be able to remove almost all of them, if not all of them, on the ship and have it fly just fine, which would make a ship like this be CPU compliant at tier 4. So that's kind of cool. And then this is well, the 14 or MX-14, 15, and 18 were the biggest SVs I ever built. So most of them are smaller than that. The MX-12 is definitely one I was interested in getting CPU compliant. It's a little bit newer. It's a little bit set up a little different than what the 14 was. Probably a little bit tougher than the 14. The 14 had a big vulnerability through the back door, which could actually, even though it's a little bit protected here, it would take it a heck of a shot though to get it all the way down a big corridor like this and hit the secure pilot seat. But it's not super protected in that regard. The rest of the ship is pretty protected. The front end defense is quite thick. And things like that. It's just it had that vulnerability on the back. And this again was a dual cockpit thing because I like to fly in first person. So I don't really like to make third person only things. I did it one time with a tank, and that was the Anubis tank that I made, and that was third person only. And although I liked it, I liked the looks of it a lot because it was very unique, I didn't like the fact that you could only control it via third person. So it's probably something I wouldn't use in game because of that, and only because of that. So now I'm trying to, every time I want to build something really tough, I'm still trying to have a first person cockpit, but I'm also trying to build like a third person cockpit inside the ship, so you can do both. And then I'm happy. But I just don't like third person only as your only choice. I just, especially trying to drive things into hangars and stuff, it gets weird, and it's a lot easier to do it, in my opinion, in first person. All right, well, y'all have a good day. We'll see you later.